Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be the next in my series of videos covering the new Avatar Legends RPG book, Uncle Iroh's Adventure Guide. So this is going to be the kind of part 3 of this series. You will have already seen the first video where I went over the legend NPC characters included in the book. Then I did the general lore video, that was part 2 on Jasmine Island, and now the next 5 videos are going to be all about the 5 separate adventures included in the book. So that means we're going to start off today with the Kyoshi era adventure, and that one is called Tea and Troubles. So again, we have to keep in mind it is a kind of themed series of adventures, so all of these adventures are going to be set on Jasmine Island. All of the adventures are going to be including the legend NPC characters that we discussed before. So in case you maybe missed that, the legend NPC characters for the Kyoshi era are Heiran and Tagaka. They are both included here as part of the story. And yes, it does seem like, at least in some iterations of like you playing this adventure, these two do come into conflict. Now, straight away, the adventure doesn't make any, I would say, super strong statement about like this is a giant canonical meeting of these two kind of main characters, but just that, hey, it can happen. It's the usual adventure thing of, you know, you're not meant to excessively use the legend NPCs to kind of take over the story. It's meant to be about your kind of player-made characters, but you know, those two are there. They play a role in what actually happens here. So that's what we are about. So, as we know from the Jasmine Island kind of general lore, prior to the Kyoshi era, Jasmine Island is pretty much kind of separate by itself. The main connection they have to the rest of the world is that they trade pretty much only with the Southern Water Tribe because it's quite close by. And they haven't been as much focused on by the rest of the world. And sort of the idea is that to a certain degree, this adventure, or at least this era, the Kyoshi era, is where some of the other nations begin to take a little bit more note of Jasmine Island and what the, you know, the jasmine tea, the golden jasmine tea that it has there, its special kind of properties, the value that that kind of has. And that's why it comes more into focus as we go through the eras after this. So that is that. So straight away you can see from the sort of cover for this adventure, we do get a look at what Jasmine Island kind of looks like here. Here's sort of the marketplace area on Jasmine Island, as far as I'm aware, during the Kyoshi era. So you can see there's not a lot of technology, but this is what it looks like. This is what the people wear. And we covered this, that the golds and whites, you know, that's why it's like this, because of golden jasmine tea. That's what the culture is based upon. So the general idea for this story, and you can probably tell what it's going to be because Tagaka is involved here, is that basically the heroes, or like, you know, the player characters, vow to protect the island, and they are tested when the Southern Water Tribe's defenses fail and a remaining splinter of the Fifth Nation attacks the island. Kind of companions keep the tea trade safe against these pirates. So we know from Tagaka's legend NPC bio that she is now free. She is broken free of her imprisonment from the novel. And this adventure highlights at least one thing that she gets up to, which is she is trying effectively to restore the Fifth Nation by taking over Jasmine Island and using this as a way to gain resources to eventually rebuild the Fifth Nation kind of full fleet. So that's why it's described as a splinter fleet here of the Fifth Nation. It's the kind of remnants here getting through the Southern Water Tribe defenses, because again, they trade with the Southern Water Tribe in exchange for a certain amount of protection. So they've broken through there, and part of how they sort of break through is also that, you know, this is where the kind of Fire Nation kind of side of things comes into play and how Heiron comes into play. But we will get into the details here. So I'm pretty much going to read out this kind of three relatively long paragraph section here, which is called the summary of the adventure here. So, beautiful Jasmine Island is not claimed by any of the four nations, though it does benefit from trading golden jasmine tea to visiting merchants, mostly from the Southern Water Tribe. Some merchants of the Southern Water Tribe have even relocated to Jasmine Island, offering their assistance and commitment to the island's own protectors to keep it safe. But now, a young protector named Merlon has betrayed his bonds with the island and sold out to Tagaka and her pirate crew, who plan to take the island for themselves. The Fifth Nation has set out for the island with a powerful warship and a few smaller transport vessels. The adventure begins with the pirates fighting a Fire Nation ship, but very soon after, the pirates launch their attack and the heroes must protect Jasmine Island. Tagaka seeks to restore the glory of the Fifth Nation, and even pirates don't work for free. She needs money, which she intends to get by seizing Jasmine Island. Conquering the island isn't her ultimate goal, but rather a stepping stone to resurrecting the Fifth Nation. Her second in command, Urchtei, takes the island's conquest more personally. He's the one who found and bribed Merlon into betraying Jasmine Island. Unlike Tagaka, Urchtei can picture himself staying on Jasmine Island, preferably as governor on behalf of the Fifth Nation. That means their approaches, while both violent and destructive, come from different angles. Tagaka wants the island's wealth, and she's willing to destroy structures and cow the islanders until they submit, while Urchtei wants the island to accept his presence and authority. Tagaka needs the tea fields, workers, and overall trade intact for her plans to succeed, but she doesn't need the islanders to be at all happy about it. Urchtei needs to come to some kind of arrangement with the people of the island, even if that arrangement is their total submission. So there's debate within the leadership, the new leadership of the Fifth Nation here, so that's kind of part of what they do here, which is that you have the legend NPC characters, but then, as has been common across a lot of the adventures in the RPG, there's a handful of brand new characters introduced that are kind of ultimately the focus of the story for the adventure. Merlon, who was expecting to take his money and run, has been reluctantly pressed into pirate service too. He makes himself scarce during the entire first act, but he peeks his head out from cover in the second act, perhaps tempting the heroes into vengeance. Merlon is part of the group of pirates captured in Act 3 when he finally faces justice for betraying his oath, to the island, obviously. So we do have a visual here. This is the only other visual that's part of the Kyoshi adventure specifically. So this gives you a sense for, like, it's the arrival clearly of Tagaka's splinter fleet here at the docks to Jasmine Island, basically. So it just gives you a little bit of a sense for what's going on here of, like, while this is happening in the marketplace, this is what's happening out at the dock, and that threatens to cause a lot of problems, of course, on the island as Tagaka comes into play. But you'll probably note there that Heiron hasn't been properly brought into play, and the final paragraph here explains that. So the Fire Nation, meanwhile, has mounted a rescue operation spearheaded by Heiron, a legendary firebender and a personal friend of Tei Asoni. Heiron's sole focus is to rescue and bring Tei home. Her motivation is fueled both by loyalty to the Fire Nation, to which Tei is a valuable asset, and the personal concern she feels for her friend. The elderly inventor herself has different plans as she takes a shine to Jasmine Island and expresses a desire to remain when all is said and done, prompting another conundrum for the heroes to solve. The story of Tei and her intended rescuer Heiron serves as a secondary quest in the protection of Jasmine Island. So you can see straight away what they're kind of almost like trying to do here, which is that fundamentally it's a very simple plot, which is Tagaka attacks Jasmine Island and the heroes, the protectors of the island, fend them off. All of your player characters are meant to be constructed on the basis of you're already part of Jasmine Island and you're part of like that defense force effectively. And then Heiron is here for a separate reason, which of course, as we go back to the start again, the adventure begins with the pirates fighting a Fire Nation ship. This is where they capture it, and this is where they get Tei. And this brings the Fire Nation into play for very separate reasons, and we'll get into it later on, where it's up to you in terms of the story about like if you want to keep Heiron's story like almost completely separate, or if you want to do a bit of a switcheroo and have like Heiron lead the defense of the island and like the heroes go after the kind of mission to get Tei back. That whole sort of idea. A lot of the background stuff as part of the island has already been covered in the first video, which is just the general lore to Jasmine Island, where it covers stuff about how, you know, the protectors is what the defenders basically of the island are called. There's also the three key families of the island, which, you know, we will get into it in a little bit. They're involved here in terms of just the island and the people who like work and live on the island making their own decisions as part of this story of like what do they do when they are attacked. That whole, you know, basic idea. So I will bring up this, which is the list of important characters and groups here, so you can maybe better kind of keep track of what's kind of going on here. I do want to just go through, they have organized this one into 3 acts, so it gives you a sense, or it's a bit more structured, this one, about what actually is going to happen. So in the 3 acts, the prologue is in a flashback. The companions explore their connection to the island and the oaths they've sworn. Again, all of your characters are meant to be from Jasmine Island. The first interlude is that the heroes have their initial pirate sighting and meeting with Heiron as she stands against the pirates aboard her own ship before they reach the island. Act 1 is that the heroes shore up the island's defenses in preparation for the attack. A small initial party of pirates lands on Jasmine Island, led by Tei, and this both provokes an initial fight, and it provides an opportunity to actually speak to the pirates about what they're up to. The second interlude is that Heiron formally introduces herself and proposes a swap of duties. She will aid in Jasmine Island's defense if the heroes rescue Tei Asoni from the pirates' warship. So that's, involving, attacking the main vessel effectively. Act 2, the pirates strike. The heroes either defend against the main attack on the island, or they set out to rescue Tei Asoni, while Heiron leads the defense of the island. And Act 3 is that you are left with the moral dilemma of what to do with the defeated pirates. And then also Tei has to make her decision about if she's going to stay or go back to the Fire Nation. Given that Heiron's mission is effectively as for the Fire Nation to bring this kind of almost like key asset home, is this an okay thing to do? And that's a bit of a conflict as well. I believe at some point in all of the text they do explain that Tagaka, I think, comes into play with the Act 2 attack, meaning that her kind of warship is left defended by like the rest of the pirates effectively. So the way Heiron and Tagaka would directly come into conflict is if the heroes do swap duties with Heiron, and Heiron is the one leading the defense of Jasmine Island. That's how those two come into conflict. So that's a bit of an interesting situation there. So you'll note there with the way that it tells you to have basically the story play out. Regardless of what happens, the idea is that the pirates are defeated. Like there isn't a scenario where it ends with the pirates kind of winning. Now, obviously, as part of the game, I guess technically you can fail to a certain degree. But if you get to the ending is the defeat of the pirates. Now, they leave it up to you if you want to decide to hand them over to the authorities of various nations, just let them go with the idea that, hey, don't come back, do something like that. So it leaves Tagaka's fate, which is probably the big canon detail here, up in the air, where of course it doesn't have to be a situation where Tagaka and Heiron do actually come into conflict with each other. And the setup from Tagaka's NPC legend bio is more so that I think Kyoshi is at some point going to track Tagaka down at some point down the road. So I think the implication is that regardless of what you do here, what way you interpret the canon ending of this, Tagaka probably gets away at the end of all of this after everything that happens, and it leaves Tagaka as a bit of an open threat kind of into the future, basically, that kind of whole idea. So there's a lot of setup details about how you construct your characters with their backstories on the island, and a lot of that depends on do you want to use the pre-generated characters, do you want to do your own characters, and you have your backstories about like what oath did you swear in relation to the culture on the island, and that whole sort of idea. So that's that whole situation. Getting into, I suppose, the characters more specifically here. I'll cover this here so we can do a bit more detail. So Heiron, of course, we know who Heiron is, and I've already pretty much gone through the main details that are important with her, which is that she's here for her friend. Tei Asoni is her friend. That's why she's here, but it's a Fire Nation mission. That this is a key asset because Tei is a brilliant inventor and she is sort of needed. But then also there is a history with her and Tagaka. They don't really go into that because, again, they don't want the focus to be on the legend NPCs. So they don't really address the idea of Heiron Tagaka, except to basically note that if they do end up fighting each other, the effect that has is that what you're meant to do as part of the story is that effectively they're an even match for each other. Heiron is not going to beat Tagaka, Tagaka is not going to beat Heiron, but they will be more than a match for each other, and they will just kind of stalemate each other. But when the heroes arrive back on the scene, you will face a sort of weakened Tagaka because she has been fighting Heiron all of this time, and this allows you maybe more clear opportunity to defeat a legend NPC to kind of end the conflict. That's sort of the idea they're going for here, ultimately. Yeah, the Heiron, unfortunately, there's not too much to really talk about here with exactly kind of what's going on here. Tagaka, again, I think they presented quite clearly what she's about. She wants to resurrect the Fifth Nation, and she will do it at any cost. She's effectively trying to use Jasmine Island as she was planning to use Yokoya from the novels, but the Fifth Nation is an even worse situation. The problem is that she's maybe a little bit blind to some of the stuff happening around her with, like, Urchtei, effectively. So yeah, we have that. The Protectors, the Defenders of Jasmine Island, this is just a general backstory thing with Jasmine Island, that these are, like, the security force, effectively, of the island, and this is where the heroes come from. Chida, the leader of the Protectors, is described as... he is the head of the Southern Water Tribe merchants and also the leader of the Protectors. So he fell into the former through birth and hard work, and the latter he believes by destiny. So protecting Jasmine Island from intruders has always been part of the Southern Water Tribe's assumed duties, but he takes the oath more seriously than any merchant before him. He's contemplated letting his eldest daughter take over the family trade so he can focus wholly on protecting Jasmine Island. So this is an interesting sort of idea of someone who has come to settle and really see Jasmine Island as their home, but is, the leader of the Southern Water Tribe merchants, effectively, as well. Tei Asoni herself, elderly, brilliant Fire Nation inventor with a penchant for making things explode. The Fire Nation sponsors her research and provides her with access to ships so she can test her inventions safely out in open water. Unfortunately, pirates hijacked her last ship and took her prisoner. She is not too perturbed by the imprisonment. The pirates treat her with a kind neglect, even fetching her tea when she explicitly asks. So the idea is that they can see, I think as they go through the adventure, they explain that the Fifth Nation pirates don't immediately see her like extreme value. They view her more as like, oh, she's an engineer. She knows how the ship works, so that's useful. But not as this like amazing inventor that could be super valuable to them in the future. So they're just kind of like, she's kind of useful, and so we'll treat her okay. So that's the interesting dynamic there, of course. Now, they don't cover too much detail on like the Fifth Nation. Like a lot of us, if we really are into the lore, might be asking about, hey, what about Takukak and stuff like that? What about him? But obviously, Urchtei is the second in command, not Takukak here, so they don't address like what's going on there. And obviously, there's only a few members of the fleet here, but you know it's enough to be threatening to this kind of new island, effectively. But then we have Urchtei, of course, who is described here. Urchtei is one of the original Fifth Nation pirates, and he took their defeat by Avatar Kyoshi as a personal humiliation. He is highly skeptical of Tagaka's leadership after the fall of the Fifth Nation under her command. Who's to say she'll do better this time? Still, Urchtei lacks the charisma to lead himself, so he settles for having Tagaka's ear for now. The Firebender is Tagaka's second in command, and the one who got Merlon to betray his oath. He's deeply invested in taking control of the island, and this is what he views as being his path to power. If he's not going to be able to become the leader of the Fifth Nation, he can become the leader of, you know, controlling Jasmine Island kind of for the Fifth Nation. And he, of course, wants to avoid the place being destroyed too badly if he's going to lead and rule this place into the future. So there's going to be a clash between the two of them. And he also roughly plans to get rid of Tagaka. One of the super interesting things about him, it's not really addressed in the text, it's just mentioned here as one of his techniques. One of his techniques is Lightning Blast. So he is a lightning bender, which is quite unique and obviously quite interesting. A Kyoshi era character who has lightning, and in this case is a Fifth Nation pirate. So that's actually very interesting and notable because it's a direct plot point in the book that like Zhu Ping An is a very rare lightning bender, and here is another kind of character. So it's kind of weird and interesting that they don't give a kind of history on that, just that, hey, happens to be the case, but that is our understanding of lightning. It is a very rare ability that random people in the world have. It's not exclusive to one avenue or the other. So that's kind of interesting. You kind of wonder, do Urchtei and Zhu Ping An maybe know each other? Is there a connection there about the fact that they have this same technique? Not really sure. So that's really cool. Interesting character, I think. Merlon, of course, from Jasmine Island. This is the kind of betrayer character, and this is the child of a prosperous family of Southern Water Tribe merchants who later moved there. He himself lacks the work ethos that made his family rich, and his inherited wealth is depleted. His family forced him to join the Protectors to set him on the right path, but he resented it. Urchtei promised to restore Merlon's coffers for the information, and he took the offer and gave them all the information that they needed. So that's sort of the idea here, is to not have the whole island be united. Here is a character kind of out for himself effectively, which I think is pretty interesting overall. Yeah, and then we have the grouping of these characters here, where we have Jin Sheka, Chi Kiala, and Fu Mela, who are the representatives of each of the three main kind of key families on the island that all relate in some way to the production of tea on the island. And these are also the three council members in this era as well from each of the families. So this is really important. Obviously this sort of evolves as we go through the eras, of course, who is on the council, the significance of the three main families, that sort of idea here. So Jin Sheka, she's the matriarch of the prominent Jin family of tea farmers. an exemplar of natural talent and hard work. She's always taken any challenge in her life head on, sometimes more to prove that she could than for the actual result. Old age and an overabundance of success has whittled away at any flexibility she had, and she rules both her family and the council with an implacable hand. Chi Kiala is from the Chi family, of course, of jasmine farmers, and was elected to the council because of their prestigious work cultivating golden jasmine flowers. They don't see this as a promotion, as Kiala would rather focus all their efforts on the golden jasmine. The sensitive council member will never sacrifice lives over land. Okay. And then Fu Mela of the Fu family of tea makers was born into her council position, which, this is an interesting detail, which goes to the youngest adult child upon the resignation of the former Fu council member. Mela, barely of age when her mother resigned, wishes the position went to her older sister. She's hidden her insecurities behind a refined facade. So they're just going to be some of the key characters, of course, disputing how the island should deal with the fact that they've been invaded by pirates. And then we also address, of course, the produce farmers, the port workers, and all this sort of stuff about what are their thoughts going to be. And a lot of the setup for these is that basically these are people who will try to defend their island but will not be strong enough to face off against pirates. But if the group of heroes is there to back up the workers, it can be a formidable force to face off against the pirates overall. And of course, especially if like Heiran is involved in all of this as well. So that's the kind of the details there. And then there's not too much really to talk about in terms of like a lot of the locations, because we of course know it takes place mostly at the port and stuff like that, to a certain degree out at sea on the ship, that kind of whole idea there. There are pre-generated characters for this adventure as well. There is Ara the Idealist, Ja, the Successor, Karak the Icon, Kevik the Bold, and Yaru the Prodigy. The basic idea for these characters is that Ara is a young refugee from the Fifth Nation. Ara's parents were enthusiastic members of the Fifth Nation. She never felt comfortable being a pirate and set out to make her own life after Tagaka's defeat, and so has come to the island and is actually a member of the Protectors. The Successor, J-O-H, youngest scion of a prestigious merchant family. Their siblings have all set up new trade routes and emporiums, and now the family's attentions turn to Joe to make good on their own legacy. Karak, a young scientist working on a patented tea melange. Karak knows there's a formula for everything. He just has to crack it. Where others see art, Karak believes there are patterns he can use to win the day. Revik, the perpetual seeker. There's always another horizon beckoning Revik, and he rarely stays in one place for long. He has strong ties to his family, however, and always comes home in the end. And then Yaru, the Prodigy, a talented young bender from the Southern Water Tribe. Unfortunately, everyone in her family is a talented bender. It's hard to stand out when you're just one in an entire field of golden flowers. So not too much going on there. Again, I don't tend to massively read into, like, from a canon perspective, the pre-generated characters, because it feels like, sure, you can use these if you want to, but you're probably going to play this using your own characters, so the importance of the pre-generated characters doesn't really feel like massively important, and canonically a lot of the times it's just like a group of heroes assisted Heiran in doing this instead of like a lot of the specifics kind of associated with this. So I think that's kind of most everything I kind of want to talk about with this one. Like I said, it is a pretty kind of simple kind of thing with the way that this all kind of plays out, and you kind of get a sense for the dynamics, of course, here in terms of when is Tei going to maybe move to potentially betray Tagaka? Will there even be an opportunity for this to happen? Might the conflict between those two prevent the pirates from being successful on this mission, of course? The Heiron Tei Asoni thing feels like definitely a plot point kind of added in later on, just to find something for Heiron to kind of do if you don't involve her in the main kind of body of the story. Kind of Merlon, it's an interesting one just because there is such a focus placed in the culture on the oaths of the island, and here's someone who has betrayed that. That's kind of interesting as well. But just the first main incident of the island facing a threat from outsiders, and how does the council handle this, because they're used to making decisions about kind of less important matters, and as time goes on the council members through the eras are expected to make tougher and tougher challenges, and it really becomes a much more political role where like people are going to be more focused on interacting with the rest of the world. Other peoples will be more focused on keeping things internal overall. So I would say a nice enough adventure, but I think there's more interesting stuff in the kind of rest of this, because like canonically, say about the key characters, there's not too much on Heiron that we learn about here, and with Tagaka it's just the idea of, okay, this is not where Tagaka is super successful, but she probably comes out of this still on the run, and we're waiting for maybe Kyoshi to take her down once again at a later point in time. But when will that happen? So they are my thoughts on the first of the 5 adventures, and then next time out we'll be going into the Roku era adventure, which is called Ceremonies and Secrets, and of course it's going to involve Princess Zaysan and also Monk Kandro. So that should be pretty exciting, but we'll talk about that one in the next video. So let me know your thoughts on this Kyoshi era adventure, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.